to make sure that the voices of those raised in adoption and foster care were represented. I understood that this was an intergenerational event, and I witnessed a lot of courage from people who had shared their story. And I actually brought my child and care file that was accessed through Freedom of Information, and it strikes me as a really important part of our history that hasn't been talked about yet in Canada. You know, there's some rumblings of people knowing a little bit about the 60's scoop, but not in the same way as we may know about residential school as a result of the apology. And I feel that the apology stopped short of acknowledging the aftermath of residential school. As they phased them out, adoption and foster care went through the roof. So by the time I was born, my 3 older brothers were adopted to 3 different white homes, and 1 went to Ireland. And so I was lucky that my foster parents insisted that me and my little sister stay together, because that wasn't the policy at the time. It was really about separating the siblings. So I think that like contributing the child and care file to the Bentwood box, when I heard that that was a possibility, that we could contribute something, it allowed me to feel that I was contributing to a part of our history that's still silenced, because our children are still terribly overrepresented in child welfare. And I'm a visual artist. I'm visual, and I imagine how many trees, because I came from a pulp and paper town, how many trees were taken down to make those files, how much paper was created so those files were possible. But the 60's scoop really took families apart. They sent children in different directions. And I gave my birth mother a photograph of her surviving children and all our children, her grandchildren at the time. And she was so overcome with emotion, she almost upchucked. She almost vomited. We cried so hard because she had never seen her children in the same photograph. And we weren't all there because 2 had already died. And I just think of how many mothers never seen their children in a photograph. Or even some of the testimony we heard here, how many children never even beholded a picture of their own mother. So how do you grieve something you can't visually see? And so there's so much, about the 60's scoop that reunions aren't pretty. There's some children who are begotten by rape or incest. I mean, it's not always easy to reconcile people having to be taken away. And those reunions can't always be happily ever afters, because it didn't have a pretty beginnings to start with. So the 60's scoop really isn't over, because our children, it's been said, are more represented in the child welfare system now than ever. And it's really an attack on motherhood. It's an attack on, I feel lucky, like I'll often, like I've seen you bring your child to events, I'll bring my little guy to events or to lectures. And I'll share with people that we are among the first generation of parents that doesn't have a legislated threat of our children being taken away. And that's what the 60's scoop was. You know, my little guy, my oldest boy, had a really unfortunate accident and sat next to a hot iron and burnt his little butt. And so I took him to the doctor to make sure he was okay. And the social worker left a card at my door because somebody in the doctor's office had reported me. And so the social worker came and did a home visit, and she asked where my boy was. I said, with his dad. I didn't happen to say that's in Ottawa, because she didn't ask. And I've learned to not tell social workers anything, colonial tactic, that's all across this planet. So I think it was really important for her to know that I said, if this was my mother 20 years ago, she wouldn't have had a fighting chance, you visiting me the way you are today. If I had been my mother 20 years ago, I would have lost my boy today. I said, I took him to the doctor. It was an unfortunate accident. I took him because I cared. I wanted to make sure that he was okay. And, you know, I know that if this was my mom's day, she wouldn't have had a fighting chance. She would have lost her babe. So I think it's a part of our history that hasn't been talked about, except that we've only stopped at residential school. We still have to blow the lid on child welfare policies that still hold our mothers in a really vulnerable place. My birth mother didn't have the capacity to mother me. And 40-ish years later, I'm still negotiating what to do with that, because I can't keep yanking her emotional chain. I can't keep trying to make her responsible for the mothering I never got. Only that I've come to accept all these years later that she didn't get the mothering she needed. And I can just hope that she finds some peace and comfort in her supports and the networks that she has way over in East Vancouver. If you ever see a granny in a scooter at the front of a procession, that'll be my mom. She's usually front and center in all the events to do with the lost and murdered missing women. So she's very committed. She's lived in the downtown east side for probably close to 30 years. And you know, she's had her hard knocks, and I accept that her gift to me was birthing me. And actually the day before I came here, I had a bath, and I was sitting there crying in the bath, and I just thought, how many times did my mom sit in the bath and cry? How many times did she think about her body going through birth 6 times to have all those babies taken from her? So it meant a lot to me that not only did I represent the loss of my mother, but it was also my loss of having a mother. So I think that's, you know, that speaks to a lot of my peers who went through adoption and foster care and that journey home. And I wear a skirt on purpose today to show that even though I'm from BC, you know, I can be Nuu-chah-nulth wherever I am. So I have the CN Tower on one side and the mountains on the other, and the wolves are running to the mountains, but on the back they're still running to the CN Tower. So I think that it was really, you know, an opportunity to also, you know, to say to my peers in Toronto that it's we have people from all over the country here, and it was nice to know that BC was represented in our voice and our journey. We're all on that same healing journey. So that was my motivation for being here. I did keep a copy of my child and care file, but I don't feel like I carry it in the same way, knowing that I was able to say to other people who went through the adoption and foster care system that your story matters too, and your journey home is a big untold story. And if I could be a little ripple of encouragement to other people trying to find their way home and fill in the blanks and learn more about who they are, that's a good thing. There's this really undercurrent of upper middle class values that are still trying to shape how we're supposed to take care of our children, and it's a sad state that we're in, and it's part of our history that still needs to be discussed more. That there's respect, but there's also a reciprocation. There's responsibility, but there's always, like, you give out, you get back. And I'm really curious what's going to come back. You know, I've enjoyed hearing, you know, the witnesses that have been assigned or here to share their reflections, because it gives me a little ripple of hope that, okay, some people are paying attention. Or even hearing our national chief Sean Atleo declare that on the day of the apology, his grandmother said, "They're finally starting to see us." And I think these type of events allow us to be less and less invisible. And I think that we still have a lot of work ahead of us, you know, knowing that there's signs that say no natives, or, you know, like there's still racism. And even my little Ahousaht newspaper back home talked about a racialized incident where people got hurt, and it's still alive. Like we have a whole lot of redneck towns throughout Canada and a lot of really bad attitudes towards Native people. And I remember one a white woman in one of my classes, she always likes to remind her friends when they get racist, think of our national anthem, you know, we are on Native land, you know. And so that was, as time moves forward, we'll find more ways to celebrate who we're becoming, not just as Indigenous people, but as Canadians. I think we really need to renew some relationships that allow everybody to thrive. I work in the education system, and it all revolves around a deficit model. And I think that if I've learned anything from our community, it's about finding out what people's strengths are. And I think Canadians will benefit from that approach to exchanging knowledge and rising up as a nation together.